Welcome to Great Historical Performances by Chamber Singers of Iowa City in Iowa City, Iowa. I'm David Puderbaugh, music director and your host for this performance. During the COVID-19 pandemic, while we are unable to experience the thrill of live performance, we are highlighting and presenting some of the notable concerts of CSIC's proud 50-year history. In addition to reliving these performances, we talk with those who were there, performers, audience members, highlighting the people and illuminating the personal stories that are the foundation of every rehearsal and concert of CSIC. So, sit back in your easy chair and enjoy some great music from the friends and family members who sing in Chamber Singers of Iowa City. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first in a series of great historical performances by Chamber Singers of Iowa City. I'm David Puderbaugh. I'm the current music director of CSIC and your host for this performance. As you may know, CSIC suspended its season this year due to the worldwide COVID-19 pandemic. This necessary and prudent move was made all the more painful because this was to be our 50th season. At the moment, we intend to simply delay our 50th anniversary celebration to next year. But we didn't want this year to go by without some acknowledgement of the past 50 years of performances by CSIC. CSIC has a rich history of performing the finest choral works. So the idea of using this somewhat quiet year to highlight a few of those performances of the past for our loyal patrons was born. We've spent the past several months digitizing our large archive of sound recordings, which date from the very first concert of the choir back in 1971 under the direction of Rosella Dirksen. And in fact, we hope to present that inaugural performance later this year. I'm delighted now, though, to share this screen with a man who I consider a great mentor and a great friend, a supremely talented conductor and teacher, who also happened to be music director of Chamber Singers of Iowa City from 1985 to 1990, Dr. David Rayl. This first concert in our series is the May 15th, 2004 performance of Franz Joseph Haydn's oratorio, The Creation, at St. Mary's Catholic Church in downtown Iowa City, featuring the choir, orchestra, soprano soloist Susan Bender, baritone soloist John Muriello, and yours truly as tenor soloist. Leading this large cast in performance was Dr. David Rayl, returning as guest conductor. So welcome, David. It's wonderful to have you with us to kick off this series.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me. It's great to be here.
Okay.
It's great to be here, but I wish I was there.
That would be preferable, absolutely. Yeah, although with the miracle of Zoom.
I am there.
Yes, you are here. You are here, definitely, and I can hear you loud and clear. So I thought we'd just have this conversation going back and forth, but I thought, I'd start out with a few questions here and, we'll kind of see where the conversation goes. But I think our patrons are going to be really interested in this conversation. And I know that many of them probably who are watching this remember your time in Iowa City, in particular with Chamber Singers. So I think it'd be a good place to start with just an update on what you've done and accomplished since your departure from Iowa City many years ago. And I know that's a lot of water under the bridge, but since your tenure as music director, you've gone on to accomplish many significant things in your career. So can you give us kind of the succinct version of kind of where did you go after Chamber Singers of Iowa City?
Is there life after Iowa City?
Yeah, I can't answer that myself.
So first of all, I would just say that I cannot believe that it is 35 years ago. Is that right?
That's right, I think.
85, yeah.
85 to 90.
Since I started with Chamber Singers. It's just astounding to me. So I was a doctoral student at Iowa from 83 to 85. Actually, I did a summer, the summer of 81, but I lived in Iowa City 83 to 85. And then starting in the fall of '85, I both had a job working at St. Ambrose University in Davenport, and that's when I started with chamber singers. Did that for 5 years, left both positions in '90. I also, in that period in 1988, started the Quad City Mozart Festival. So I had actually a wonderful conducting and a wonderful musical life in Eastern Iowa. Then I went to the University of Missouri at Columbia, and I was there from 1990 until 2002. And actually, you might know that Dr. Puderbaugh was a graduate student, a master's student of mine sometime in the 90s.
94 to 96.
94 to 96, which means that he sang in the 1995 performance at ACDA.
That's right.
Yeah.
It was one of my first performances with you.
Yeah. And then in 2002, I came to Michigan State as director of choral programs. And then some number of years after that, I also became associate dean. So I'm actually senior associate dean. I still am director of choral programs, still teach lots of graduate conductors, and am senior associate dean for graduate studies and research. So that's the last 35 years.
Well, you did it very succinctly. I appreciate that. And certainly, just to kind of illuminate our own connection, which you already mentioned, we initially crossed paths in 1994 when you were at Mizzou, and I came there for my master's degree program, and it was I still consider it perhaps the most momentous decision I ever made. So I don't mean to embarrass you, but that would definitely was so important to me that I was there at that time. And so, although I could have studied with you later, perhaps, but at that point, it was I learned so much from you during that period. So, and also, I mean, I think if I recall, you were perhaps the one who told me that the position of Chamber Singers of Iowa City was open, because the same year you left,
right,
I left to start my doctoral program here at Iowa. And I have a vague recollection of you sending me a note or calling me or saying something like, hey, you should apply for the job. It's opened up. The music director job's opening up.
I think that we should just say that actually I got you the job. No. Yeah.
You know?
It's a lovely bit of sort of symmetry to have you get a doctorate from the University of Iowa and then to also have you be the conductor of chamber singers, because that both of those, my experience as a graduate student at Iowa and my experience with chamber singers were for me some of the most important educational musical experiences of my career. So there's a lovely symmetry to that.
Well, I'm not going to dispute that you got me the job. So
no, you got it, and you have kept it, and you've actually done great stuff there. So I'm delighted to have you on for you to be on the faculty at Iowa, and I'm delighted that you're the music director of Chamber Singers.
Well, thank you. At least I've hung on to the job, so there's that.
Yeah.
Okay. So my next question for you, I came up with a number of questions here that I think our listeners will be interested in just hearing your thoughts on. So my next question is, do you remember how you landed the job of music director of Chamber Singers of Iowa City? And like, do you have memories of the interview process?
So oddly enough, I do have one very specific memory, and I hope this is true. Your listeners will probably appreciate this. David and I were talking before we started recording. You know, there were some things that I believed happened, and then I looked at the actual program, and what I remembered was actually not quite what had apparently happened. But I think I'm sure this is true. So Scott McCoy, who was a colleague of mine in the grad program at Iowa, had been my predecessor, was my predecessor. He had conducted chamber singers either for a year or 2 years. It must have been 2 years because, well, we'll talk about this, but I know I saw a performance that Larry Munson conducted. So anyway, Scott was my predecessor. It was, I believe that the interview, and he was leaving, and actually I did not have a job. It got to be summer. I had interviewed for a couple of jobs at schools that will remain nameless, who chose not to hire me. And I had an interview at Weber State in Ogden, Utah.
Mm-hmm.
And I flew back from Salt Lake City that afternoon, landed at Cedar Rapids, drove straight to, I'm pretty sure the interview was at the Methodist Church right downtown.
Okay.
Do you know, I can't think of that big
Yep.
Gothic church.
Yep.
And literally walked in and waited outside for, I don't know, 15 minutes or some length of time, and went in and did the actual audition. I have no memory of what I conducted, but in retrospect, I was thinking the other day, that was really stupid to think that everything would run on time, that planes would be on time, that I could land at Cedar Rapids, drive and make it for it was late. It was 8:30 or 9 o'clock audition, because I think I was the last one that evening. But that's my memory of the interview. I have no memory of the actual interview process, but I do remember that aspect of the audition.
That's yeah, I have vague recollections of mine as well. I mean, mine wasn't nearly as long ago, but I think mine was at First Presbyterian, and of course that would have been out on Rochester on the east side of town.
Yeah.
And I remember, I think I'm not 100% sure, but I think it was a movement or two from the Mozart Requiem, and it was in that little choir room that they have there. I just remember it feeling pretty cramped. But yeah, it was a great memories for sure.
It would be interesting if some of your listeners now were there at that time. I mean, some people they can email you or email me and correct my memory. By the way, I didn't get offered the job at Weber State either. And then, so I was without a job. So my plan was I was going to do chamber singers and stay in Iowa City and write my document. And then this job at actually, the interesting thing, Larry Munson was going to take that job at St. Ambrose, and through a series of things decided not to. And so that job became open in late June, I think I interviewed late June, early July. So it was just a really fortuitous sort of coming together of things. Those 5 years at St. Ambrose were also, for different reasons, really great for me as well.
So what, I think you've kind of answered this already, but kind of what attracted you to the position at Chamber Singers, the music director position?
Well, I mean, I had heard the group. They had a great, not just a great reputation, but a well-deserved great reputation in the community. I think that I heard a St. Matthew Passion that Larry Munson did in Sacred Heart. That could, again, be an imagined memory. But I know that I heard a Brahms Requiem that Scott McCoy did at Zion Lutheran. Is that where we used to rehearse?
Yes, I believe so.
Campus. So, and I mean, I'm, how old I was, 30 something. And the opportunity to do all that great music with really good singers and really good players in a community like Iowa City was sort of like a dream come true. So, I had the good fortune in those 5 years really to sort of do either another doctorate or a postdoc, or to put into practice all the things that you learn in a doctoral program, but you don't always have a chance to actually, make the mistakes that teach you what to do and what not to do. So what attracted me was the reputation of the group. I mean, Rilling had conducted it in Rosella's time. Number of other really well-known conductors, and they had done great work. And particularly the Bach Festival, the opportunity to do all that Bach was really attractive to me. I mean, when I look back, I think that I was so, everyone when they're young, we're always fearless. I would be much more fearful now, but it was like, oh, sure, I can do this. Sure, I can do a St. John Passion, no problem.
Yeah, I totally hear you on that idea of youth and I don't know, blissful ignorance, I guess, perhaps, but it is. I've always been very struck with that rich history of the group as well. The fact that the great conductors that came through, pulling off B minor masses and Passion, sure. And just right down the line, and they were doing it fairly often. It seems like if you go back and look at the history as well, it's just really something. I think you kind of talked about. I was going to ask you about the kind of the reputation of the group back then, and it sounds like it was quite quite strong, actually.
Definitely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and still is, I think, a really, really wonderful community-based choir.
It's just my own experience as well. I mean, I've been able to do some really wonderful things with them, that wonderful works at a high level, I think quite a high level, that I wouldn't have had the opportunity to do with them.
Well, I mean, I don't know how many Bach cantatas and one of the Missa Brevis settings, and a Passion, and some instrumental music. And I mean, that's more Bach than I've probably done in all the years combined. I mean, I've done a few cantatas since then, but I mean, basically my repertoire of Bach cantatas goes back to those Bach cantatas that I did in those 5 years. So yeah, it was
me.
Knowing that this interview was coming up made me stop and think about all those years and all the pieces that I did for the first time there. It was a remarkable opportunity. And we, and I know you continue to do collaborative things within the community. We did shared several programs with, I don't know that this still exists, but Bill Hibbard, who was on the composition faculty, had a community string orchestra that we shared at least a couple of 3 concerts with. I know that we did shared a concert with a dance company. And actually, I thought that we had done Menotti, Unicorn, Gorgon, and Manticore with them, but we didn't, according to the program. So I think maybe we did. They did a danced version of Stravinsky's Symphony of Psalms in the 2-piano version.
Oh, that's fantastic.
I also know that, and I can't remember this piece, but we did a piece we sang with the Cedar Rapids Symphony on the premiere of something that Chris Tiemeyer,
You're right. Yeah.
conductor, did. So yeah, I mean, we had some really good ties to the community, and the support of the community was, I think, really strong.
Yeah, I think that still, in terms of the collaborative aspects. I mean, there's still a Iowa City String Orchestra. I don't know if it's the same group. I bet I don't know. It's been several years since we've worked with them, but just the idea or the possibilities, working with other community groups. We've done, I guess it used to be Cedar Rapids Symphony, now it's Orchestra Iowa, and we've done performances with them. In fact, we had one canceled back last April. We were going to do Mozart Requiem with them, but that opportunity for collaboration sounds like it's been something that's been a very constant thing during these years. So do you have any specific or particular memories of your time as the music director that you recall today that kind of stick with you? Maybe particular pieces. You've mentioned a couple things already, but was wondering if you would have any others. Would you like to elaborate on that?
I do. I'll talk about this. I do have a couple of. I just had a conducting nightmare memory flashed through my mind, which I'll share with you in a second. Well, what I remember most are the major works that I got to do, which I had never done before, and which was an incredible opportunity. So I think in that first season in the fall, I did an All-American program, and I think we did Chichester Psalms, and then we did Mozart Requiem probably in February, with a Salieri Te Deum that I still teach when I teach classic romantic choral lit, as I am this semester. We did an Orff Carmina Burana. We did, with this Iowa City string group, we did Pauken Messa, and then, lots of Bach cantatas and some Brandenburgs, and I'll tell you the Brandenburg story in a minute. But the richest musical memories are the St. John Passion that I did, and then I did a B minor mass, I think my last summer there. Wow. Those are great memories.
Super ambitious.
The conducting memory is the last movement of, might be second Brandenburg the one with flute, violin, and harpsichord. It starts in a weird place in the bar, and it's in 2/6/8. Anyway, everybody has an entrance, and the harpsichord plays as a soloist, not a continuo instrument, has the third entrance. And we got to it, and because I probably wasn't as careful as I would now make my students be about being clear where we were starting, although it had been fine in rehearsal, we got to it and he played a whole beat early. So we had this big mess going on with these three instruments. So I just stopped. I thought, it's okay. We'll just stop and we'll start again. And I said, you were a beat early. And then we do it again. And we're coming up to that entrance. And I, turned to the harpsichord and he played a beat early again. So we just continued until we came to a place where we all knew where we were.
Oh my, wow. Yeah, it almost makes me want to have another Zoom conversation with just performance foibles.
Yeah. But you know what? The thing about it is, this sounds like the musings of an old person, the old person that I never thought I would become. But I mean, unless you make those mistakes and unless those things happen to you, that's the best way to learn. And so I know that, things that I really talk to my conducting students about, you have to be really careful here, because realize that they're going to think whatever, this or that. And I know they probably think, yeah, okay, let's move on. But yeah, that's how all of us learn and grow and fall on our face and pick ourselves up.
Absolutely. I mean, I'll share one very briefly that I actually learned under your tutelage. I think it was my first year in the program at Mizzou. We were doing that Te Deum concert with the choral union in orchestra. Mm-hmm. And I think it was the dress rehearsal. And I conducted part of the Haydn Te Deum, maybe the fugue to the end.
Okay.
Just briefly while you went out and listened, if I recall. And it came out, people know that, if people know that piece or not, it's hard to describe it. But basically, the fugue bubbles along until we get to this fermata, and then it goes into the coda right at the end. And I come up to that and I do with both hands a big cutoff and go, and it was a disaster. The orchestra just crashed and burned. And afterwards you said, this is why you cut off your fermata with one hand and you gesture. Right. And I'll tell you, I have never conducted fermata any different since then. So
good for you. Thank you. But yeah. So, I mean, the only way you can, you can be told that by a teacher, it's fine. But the only way is to have a bad experience, preferably in a rehearsal, not in a performance. And I mean, it's the best way to learn.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing you mentioned, I think you mentioned the Salieri Te Deum and the Mozart Requiem. While I was looking through your programs in preparation for this, our discussion, I saw that you had done those as a pair. And about 8 or 9 years ago, I did them as a pair with Chamber Singers of Iowa City. And there's an obvious connection, right, between those two pieces. But I wonder if I somehow subliminally remembered that from maybe a choral lit class with you way back in the 1990s or something. So anyway, history, you talked about everything kind of circulates, coming around again. It did with that concert as well. It was a great concert.
That one was at St. Wenceslas, I think, which is where I was the music director, as I recall.
Okay. I'm trying to remember. I think we did that concert, our concert out Clear Creek Amana High School it's a fairly new, it's a nice building, but it was quite new. It just opened up. And so we used their auditorium out there in Tiffin, Iowa, just to the west of Iowa City. So very interesting connection there. So going back to your time back in the late 80s there, are there specific people in the choir, or maybe even outside the choir, that you felt you connected to strongly, or that you just remember well? And I don't know if this is a good question or not, but do they have any influence on your work with the group? I'm just kind of curious.
So I did actually put together a list. The most influential person and the person for whom I am so grateful that I had the opportunity to work with was Eldon Obrecht, the bass teacher.
Mm-hmm.
And his wife, Maxine, always put the orchestra together for us
Oh, yeah.
for whatever, all those Bach festivals and whatever other concerts we did, unless we did them with Hibbard's group. And Eldon taught me so much about like how to, all the different kinds of decisions you can make about the continuo group, the cellos, basses, bassoons, and harpsichord or organ, and how to think about them, how to think about that group, how to think about orchestrating it, how to think about trying to get them to play. And the biggest thing is that Eldon Obrecht loved music. And so it didn't matter, you know, what we were doing. If when I looked, I mean, I can still see him back there. He was always into it 110%. I mean, he, for the thing that I do that no one else that I know does, that I learned from Eldon and I think is fabulous, is sometimes to have in a continual, in like Messiah, O Thou That Tellest, I have the bass pits and then the cello play arco, and it just adds sort of a lovely little lilting feeling to it. But he would do that, or he would leave out notes and only play the downbeat and the pick. I mean, Eldon was constantly sort of improvising back there. So that's a really important, powerful, I learned a lot from him. I mean, I obviously learned a lot from the string players. I think Alan, I don't know if Alan Ohms, I worked with him in the Quad Cities, I know, maybe in Iowa City as well. Certainly Don Haynes was, again, I won't tell this story, but called me my attention to something I was doing in a rehearsal that was not helpful. So I worked with him. So yeah, all those were great, you know, great teachers, great parts of my education. And then so many great people in the group. So Suzanne Richardson was the president of the board, I believe, in that first year or two. And I say that because I remember distinctly where they lived up by the hospital, and going to some board meetings there. And then later Danelle Essing
Yes.
became president of the board and was great to work with. I know that when I did the creation in 2004, I stayed with Carol Christensen.
Correct. Oh, yes, right.
Out north of town. And I have a wonderful memory of Carol singing. I did a Schutz, one of the Salman Davids, and in one of the choirs it's really supposed to be a countertenor, but alto with 3 trombones in one of the choirs, and then a couple other choirs. And I have a wonderful memory of Carol being in the balcony at Zion Lutheran, I think it's Zion, singing that solo. So yeah, great memories. You provided some other names here that are of people who were, some of them are still singing with you, which is fantastic. You mentioned Lynn McMorris, who you say now lives in Columbia, Missouri.
Oh yeah, they've been there. Well, they first went down. They may watch this, so I don't want to speak up after. But I know they moved down near the Lake of the Ozarks for a couple years, and then they ended up in Columbia. And I saw them about a year and a half.
Oh, cool.
And I think they really love it down there, and we really miss them here. I tried to talk them out of moving down south, but they wouldn't listen to me.
Yeah. So, and then I've made a list here. Harold Blosser, who had sung with the group for a long time, sang with us. Dave Coleman is a soloist on a number of things, a number of pieces I know. Dave Rust, who I think sang tenor for me, maybe, but you said maybe a singing bass for you. Jody Faulkner came as the music librarian at some point. And then sang with us, was a great resource, knew a ton, you know, great musician. Carol Horton was one of the most loyal and wonderful members. I know she passed away a number of years ago, but great human being. Joyce Marner, and so you say here, Joyce Marner and Barb Schonbacher are still singing, which is fabulous.
They are. They are dedicated and it's really just wonderful members of it.
Yeah, and I think this is true. Isn't Barb, or she probably is retired now, but wasn't she like a heart transplant nurse or something?
That sounds right. That sounds.
Yeah, like she would have to get in a plane and bring a heart or get a heart or whatever. So here's another great memory. You mentioned Tamara Schoenbaum,
Mm-hmm.
that they moved. So when I did Carmina, her husband was a historian, if I get this right, David, and Tamara had maybe even a doctorate in like medieval German literature or something. So when we did Carmina, I still have that score or those notes. It was the most meticulous pronunciation guide to Carmina Burana, and some things that nobody else ever does that she had put together. And as anyone who remembers her or who knows her knows that she was actually very, very meticulous. But that was, again, a great learning experience. So
Yeah, it's well, and Tamara, I mean, yeah. So they moved to DC several years ago, but right up until they left, she was still helping us with pronunciation. If I recall, the Carmina Burana that we did several years ago, and
very, very specific. And then
a
you
little
mentioned
insert.
Jason Chen sang, Tom Ort sang, Dave Parsons. And then you said that Joe Patrick passed away last fall, who was an art teacher. Great,
Yeah,
sort of just a great spirit in the bass section.
absolutely, absolutely.
Actually, Joe Patrick was on my doctoral committee because in those days you had to have somebody from outside your department. And I mean, he was a painter. I think he was a painter. So he didn't really know much about art history, but I can remember the question he asked in my defense. So I did these Charpentier litanies from the court of Louis XIV, and he asked about it's Lebrun is a famous artist in the court, maybe architect in the court of Louis XIV. I have no, I just literally that just came to me as we were talking, but yeah, that was his question for me in my
wow. Oh, he did his work as an outside member. That's real. That's impressive, actually. Yeah, yeah. So many of those people have sung since I've been with chamber singers off and on, and like you said, a couple of them still are singing to this.
That's fantastic. That is so great. You know, I have it's a different kind of group. It's choral union, so it's quite honestly not of the quality. It's not auditioned here. Has a few students. We always join with students for our major works, but I know how painful it is this fall for people not to be able to sing. It's you know, and I think for those of us who are in the profession, sometimes we don't realize how important choral singing is to someone for whom it's not, you know, how they earn a living. So I'm hopeful that a year from now we're not still doing Zoom meetings. We have a fundraiser this weekend. It's all virtual. It's actually all pre-recorded, but we put together a bunch of stuff. It's tomorrow night. But yeah, I hope a year from now we're not in the same situation.
Yeah, I actually I thought about putting some questions in about our current situation, but I feel that that's a whole nother rabbit hole that could take this into a whole other direction. We could do that sometime though.
It's Friday afternoon. I'm feeling good. Let's not go down that.
Let's not go down there. Hey, I'm all for that. I agree. Absolutely. All right. So we've been going for a little while here. You know, let's I'm just thinking maybe it's now be a time. I want to ask you about the performance itself, and maybe we can do that when we come back.
Okay.
Listen to the first half of the concert, and then at intermission we can come back and kind of pick up where we left off. And I have just a few questions about the piece itself. So let's do that, and we'll continue our talk in a little bit.
That sounds good.
Okay.
upon the face of the deep. Confusion yields, and order shines most fair. Confusion yields, and order shines most fair, and order shines most fair. Aghast, the fiends of hell confounded fly. Down they sink in the deep abyss to endless night. Down they sink in the deep abyss to endless night. To endless night, to endless night. Down they sink in the deep abyss to endless night.
And God made the firmament, and divided the waters which were under the firmament from the waters which were above the firmament. And it was so. Then howling raged the blast of the tempest. The clouds then were driven like chaff in the wind. The lightning slashed the heavens asunder. And crashing thunder resounded on high. From waters rose at his command the all-refreshing rain. The devastating hail. The light and flaky snow.
What wonder doth his work reveal to heaven's host in joyful throng? And glory sound throughout the skies, the praise of God, the praise of God, and of the second day, and of the second day. And glory sound throughout the skies, the praise of God, the praise of God, of the second day, and second day. What wonder doth his work reveal to heaven's host in joyful throng? And praise of the praise of the praise of the second day, and of the second day. What wonder doth his work reveal to heaven's host in joyful throng? Loud resound throughout the skies, loud resound throughout the skies, the praise of God, the praise of God, the praise of God, of the second day, the second day. Praise of the praise of God, of the second day, of the second
And God said, let the waters under the heaven be gathered together to one place, and let the dry land appear. And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering of the waters called he the seas. And God saw that it was good. tumultuous swells the raging sea, rolling in foaming billows, tumultuous, tumultuous swells the raging sea, tumultuous swells the raging sea. Island and headland uplifted, through clouds their towering summits rise, through clouds their towering summits rise. Island and headland uplifted, through clouds their towering summits rise, through clouds their towering summits rise, through clouds their towering summits rise. Full flows the gathering stream and winding wanders through broad and ample plains. Full flows the gathering stream and winding wanders. Full flows the gathering stream and winding silent glade
And the heavenly host proclaimed the third day, praising God and saying, "Awake the power, ye Christ awaken, now let the praise of God resound, rejoice in the Lord, the mighty God. Rejoice in the Lord, the mighty And God said, "Let there be lights in the firmament of heaven, to divide the day from the night, to give their light upon the earth. And let them be for signs and for seasons, and for days and for years. He made the stars also." Radiant now the sun bestrides the sky. A wondrous, joyful bridegroom, a giant proud and glad, he runs his ordered course.
domain, shine with unnumbered magnitude of stars. And the sons of God rejoiced in the fourth day in chorus divine, praising God's great might and saying, the heavens attain the glory of God. With wonders of his hand, with sounds of firmament. With wonders of his hand, with sounds of firmament. Revealed are his ways by day unto day. By night that is gone to following night, by night that is gone to following night. In every land is one, every ear will hearken, never tongue be dumb, never, never, never tongue be dumb. In every land is one, every ear will hearken, never tongue be dumb, never, never, never tongue be dumb, never, never, never.
All right. Well, welcome back, everyone. We hope you've enjoyed that first half of the May 2004 performance of Haydn's The Creation at St. Mary's in Iowa City by the Chamber Singers of Iowa City and a whole bunch of other people as well, orchestra and soloists. With me still is Dr. David Rayl, who was the music director of Chamber Singers from 1985 to 1990, and he was our guest conductor for the performance that you've heard half of already. So, David, as I mentioned before, I wanted to kind of move to the performance itself and just kind of pick your brain with your memories and see, and also get your insight into the piece itself. So, like as we've been talking about, you guest conducted this performance, and I have memories of talking through various options of what pieces could be done while we were thinking of doing this performance. I honestly don't remember what the other options were, but I'm just curious if you recall, or maybe it's kind of this, it still holds true today, is why The Creation?
You know, I don't remember. I love Haydn. I had done the piece in Missouri. I did it subsequently here. I don't know why we settled on that, actually, to tell you the truth. I mean, I don't know. I mean, I have a soft spot in my heart always for Haydn because Don Moses, who was my teacher, was a Haydn expert. I had been to Eisenstadt twice, but I'm not, I don't know why we settled on Creation. I mean, one of the issues is, if you said to me now, come and do a concert, and the Haydn piece that I'm most enamored with now, because it's the most recent one I did, would be Lord Nelson. But those are a funny length, so maybe we wanted to do one piece. If you do Lord Nelson, you got to do something else.
Yeah, I don't recall either. But certainly, I mean, I certainly share your affection for Haydn. I mean, I remember when I was a wee lad, it was all about Mozart, and Mozart's wonderful. But Haydn, you know.
Mozart is wonderful, but I think Haydn is, yeah.
Yeah, I agree.
Remarkable composer, and when he wants to be incredibly dramatic and.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think I have also a vague recollection. This is actually back in the 90s of you actually talking about The Creation. I have this recollection of being with you over at Manchester Methodist Church in St. Louis or Chesterfield, wherever that suburb of St. Louis was, and they were doing some choruses of The Creation or something. And I just remember you. Yeah, this could be a false memory, but I seem to remember you giving a very engaging, off-the-cuff talk about just the background of the piece.
I have
okay.
memory of being at Manchester United Methodist, where Kevin Macbeth is or was. I don't remember I don't remember the creation part of it, but
it may be a figment of my imagination or my whatever. But I do believe you have some good thoughts on The Creation itself. I'm just curious, if just for our viewers, if you could just give a little, I don't know, maybe a little background. I know that's a deep well, but.
So Creation comes at the end of his life. He's done everything. The most important thing is that he's been to England, and he is exposed there, but also in Vienna to Handel oratorios. But also in England, he writes all the London symphonies. And so his mastery of symphonic writing, blended with his background as a church musician writing for choruses, and as an opera composer and writing for soloists, sort of all comes together in Creation, and then later the Seasons. It's the story of Creation. It's loose. The libretto is an English libretto that he gets someone gives him in England. It's based on Milton's Paradise Lost. Basically, instead of an overture, there's this, one of the great pieces in the piece is this depiction of chaos, representation of chaos, which is, again, like no other music that was written prior to that time. harmonically and just in terms of the orchestration. And then it basically moves day by day by day through the creation of various animals, plants, the earth, water, human beings. And then the last part is Adam and Eve in the garden in their pre-snake, their pre-sin state. So.
I think you summed it up well. Absolutely. So you've conducted a couple times now, correct? Or
three times.
3 times.
Once in Missouri. I did it once with the Lansing Symphony here in our courses, and then in
Okay.
04.
Do you are there any particular moments of the oratorio that, as a conductor, that you even today, even after 3 times, that you just really enjoy?
Yeah. So what I'll sort of answer that question back in a backwards way. I wish that I loved the choruses more. I like and they're very effective where they occur. They almost all occur at the end of various days, and they're general choruses of praise and thanksgiving. To me, the more interesting music actually is the most interesting music comes in some of the accompanied recits. So my favorite music is probably when God creates the sun, and it's before heavens are telling the tenor. Well, it's the tenor, isn't it?
Yep.
The tenor accompanied recit, which is this incredibly wonderful sort of sunrise, and then the sun. Then there's this brilliant sort of majestic music, and then he does the moon. Right, the moon is created, or the moon rises. I think that's just extraordinary music. And then I like, just because it's fun and pictorial, there's a accompanied recit with all kinds of animals, like cows are mooing in the field, and horses are leaping, and tigers are crouching, and
right.
So that's fun. There's a beautiful short accompanied recit, kind of an arioso, about God made great whales.
Right.
And it's orchestrated for like 3 cellos and 2 violas and string bass. It's this really dark, sort of turbulent accompaniment. So there's and then the greatest moment, perhaps one of the greatest moments in all of Haydn is Let There Be Light, at the end of the representation of chaos, where God says, blah, 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 let there be light, and there was light, and then it's one of the most brilliant C major chords in the history of Western music. So there are lots of great moments. I think that the choruses are not as inventive as some other Haydn choruses from some of the masses, and but it's a great piece, and the way that the choruses fit in terms of the telling of the story is also very cool.
I agree with you 100%. I at the risk of sounding like just a kind of a jaded professional, I feel those choruses, they're all amazing, and they're just so vibrant and powerful. But if you were to line them up one after another, they'd all sound the same. Like they all have the same that same voice.
Yeah, and they all end with a fugue, and I mean they're all slightly different, and there are wonderful things about them, but
absolutely, but stunning, and and that whole we talked about how Haydn is such a drama, can be so dramatic, and there's the story with when he was composing the oratorio, how he kept the creation of light under wraps and wouldn't let anybody know about it because he wanted the maximum impact. And now that we even know it's coming, the impact is still
it's still pretty incredible. Yeah,
absolutely. I just can't imagine what it was like for the original audience to hear that.
Well, I think, again, I don't think I'm making this up. I think there are first-hand accounts that talk about how that the music was so visual and so powerful emotionally that people wept in the early performances of it. So.
Right. Yeah. I think I've read that as well. And I think also there are some accounts of even that premiere, or maybe even after the premiere, where that right at that creation of light, the audience would just burst into applause.
Applause, yeah, I think that's true. Yeah.
Extended period of time, it would just stop the performance for a while. And it's hard to imagine today, but regardless, it's still just an amazing moment for sure.
And who played harpsichord at the first performance of Creation?
Oh gosh,
Salieri.
am I gonna get graded on this?
Probably it'll be a comps question. Salieri actually was the harpsichordist.
Well, okay, okay. You know, I teach choral lit, but who did I learn it from? You is still the master.
Well, I learned it from a lot of different people.
Oh, this has been really good. Do you have any specific, this may be, I'm putting you on the spot here, any specific recollections of performance? So of course, your longtime friend, Susan Bender, was a soprano.
Right.
John Muriello, who's still on our faculty, voice faculty, was the bass soloist. He was a tenor soloist.
And you were the tenor soloist. So I have really great, I mean, John, who I didn't know, you know, had a great reputation, came to Iowa with a great reputation as a singing actor.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So really enjoyed working with him. Really enjoyed, what's the C major aria in Native Worth? And
yeah, that's tenor.
In Native Worth, is that the text?
Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm.
See, I wasn't really prepared for this, but that was beautiful. And then Susan, I think, is a really lovely, lovely singer. We were in school together, and what is the first aria that she has two arias, the 6-1 and 6-8 in B flat major. Doesn't help. Anyway, great memories of the trio. You know, the it becomes a chorus, but bum, 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 bum. I have some sort of memory of the three of you singing that, sort of ripping into it.
Yeah, I remember being crammed into the undercroft, like before the performance and at intermission. There's not a lot of space down there. And then I also remember it was a really tight squeeze to get a good size orchestra.
Big orchestra, right?
Where the altar is at St. Mary's. And if I remember correctly, we even had to, like you and we soloists, we were on platforms that came off off, you know, just because we couldn't get everybody quite up to that.
Yeah.
But it was quite logistical. And I also remember just like the house was packed. I mean,
it was a big crowd, I think.
St. Mary's.
That was for what year? That was in 2004, so that would have been.
It wasn't an anniversary year.
Yeah.
It was actually the year before one, because the next year,
okay,
we would have called it our 35th, I guess, 35th year. Yeah, or the next season, excuse me. Well, this is great. You know, before I think we go back to the second half, do you have any just, I don't know, final thoughts or just words about, you know, chamber singers or really anything else we've done today?
Well, I guess I just want to reiterate that it was, I mean, it was an honor. It was an incredible opportunity, a really great privilege, a really great educational experience for me for those 5 years. I mean, it had a profound impact on me, just as I said, sort of like a postdoc. So Dr. Moses and my whole experience at Iowa studying with John Mancura, Dr. Blesh, that was that had its own powerful impact on me. But then to be able to follow that up with 5 years with chamber singers was, I think, the best way to think about it is like a postdoc, which really, I mean, I came out of that seven-year period a vastly different kind of conductor, and you know, lots of whatever good thing, you know, things I've achieved or things that have happened with teaching, or you know, a lot of that comes because of that experience in those 5 years. So it's fun to reminisce about it. It's not something I think about.
It is.
I guess the last thing I would say is that what it allowed me to do is start to develop kind of an independent voice as a conductor, making interpretive decisions. You know, when you're a grad student, you're always trying to make other people happy. And it was the first time in my life, I think, that I started to that continues, you know. But I started to have sort of an independent creative voice as a conductor. So I'm very grateful for the opportunity.
It's good to hear you say a lot of those things, because they just ring so true for me as well in my time with chamber singers, from the, you know, as a grad student, and then just kind of just all the way down through the years. I mean, every performance, you know, I feel like there's something a little, even if it's a small thing, you know, something new is learned, even to this day, you know. But certainly it's been extremely formative for me, and it's just been a great outlet for myself as well. So it's good to hear that that chamber singer still does that.
Absolutely. And you know, then the other thing is that I constantly am reminded of how, I mean, community-based choral groups are really, really important. I hope that we can get through this and I hope that choral singing emerges from this current situation. I hope that science provides us with a way for people to continue to sing, because it really is, it's really an important activity, not just recreationally, but, you know, spiritually, emotionally, physically. So yeah, I think with it taken away, people are really struck by how important it is in their lives.
There's nothing else I can add to that. You couldn't really say, I couldn't say it any better than that. Well, thanks for this really wonderful conversation.
It's great. And it's nice to, you know, I have no idea who I'm saying hi to, but hi to any of my former singers and friends in Iowa City.
Yeah. Well, thank you, David, so much. And you know, we all wish you just the best as we navigate this, you know, this current year, and then whatever the future holds for you. And we hope you'll stay in touch.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks much.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And God said, let the waters bring forth abundantly every moving creature that hath life, and fowl that fly above the earth in the open firmament of heaven.
And God created great whales, and every living creature that moveth, and God blessed them, saying, Be fruitful and multiply, ye creatures of the sky. Be multiplied and fill the air with singing. Multiply, ye creatures of the waters, and fill each watery deep. Be fruitful, grow, and multiply. Rejoice in the Lord your God. Rejoice in the Lord your God. And the angels struck their immortal harps, and sang the wonders, of the 5th day.
The Lord is
The Lord is great, and great is might, and never stands his name. The Lord is great, and great is might, and never stands his name, and never stands his name. And ever, ever, ever stands his name. Lord is great, and great is might, and never stands his name, and never stands his name. Lord is great, and great is might, and never stands his name. Lord is great, and great is might, and stands his name, and never stands his Lord is great, great is might, stands his name, and never stands his And God said, Let earth bring forth every living creature after his kind, cattle and creeping things, and beasts of the earth after his kind. Straight opening her fertile womb, The earth brings forth at God's command unnumbered living creatures in perfect forms and fully grown. Triumphant roaring stands the lion there. With a lightning leap the tiger appears. Bounding with branching head the nimble stag. With snorting and stamping, flying mane, uprears in might the noble steed. In pleasant pastures, quietly the cattle graze on meadows green. And o'er the ground, as growing there, abide the fleecy, gentle sheep. As clouds of dust arise in swarms assembled, the hosts of insects. In long dimension creeps with sinuous trace the worm. Now shines the brightest glory of heaven. Now spreads the lavish attire of earth. The air is filled with soaring processions. The water swelled by swarming legions. The ground is trod by ponderous beasts. The ground is trod by ponderous beasts. But all the work was not complete. But all the work was not complete. There wanted yet that wondrous being, that God's design might thankful see. And grant his goodness joyful praise. But all the world that wondrous being, that God's design might thankful sing, and grant his goodness joyful praise. That God's design might thankful see, and grant his goodness joyful praise, and grant his goodness joyful praise, and grant his goodness, and grant his goodness joyful praise.
And God created man in his own image. In the image of God created he him. Male and female created he them. And God breathed into his nostrils the breath of life. And man became a living soul.
And God saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. And the heavenly choir, loud rejoicing, raised their song of praise, and hailed the sixth day.
Glory, sweetness, and glory,
and shines the thanks they owe. For soon their tongue shall tell the louder praise of God. Let then our voices ring, united with their song.
Thou star of morning, oh, how fair thy tidings of the day. What radiance rare, O sun, is thine, thou eye and soul of all. What radiance rare, O sun, is thine, thou eye and soul of all. mighty elements. By his power your endless changes make, your endless changes make. Ye misty vapors, which the wind doth spin and roll through heaven, doth spin and roll through heaven. Oh, sing the praise of God, 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 oh, great is his name, and great and mighty, great is his name, and great is his might.
Soft flowing fountains, there is peace, and trees are growing round. Fragrant plants, flowers fair, with sweetness fill the air. Fragrant plants, flowers fair, sweetness fill the air.
That on highest mountains climb, and ye that lowly creep, ye whose flight doth leap the skies, and ye that swim the deep, ye creatures of our God and King.
false conceit, betray ye not, the more to covet than ye have, and more to know than ye should. Grace